Welcome to the PM Square webinar, What's New in Cognos Analytics 11.1.2. My name is Chris Loschel, and I'm the Director of Sales here at PM Square, and today I'll be serving as your MC for today's presentation. Now, during this, what should be around a 30-minute webinar, we're going to be reviewing the most impactful changes from this recent release and what you need to know about it. Joining me today is Ryan Dolley. He's a Senior Solution Architect for us at PM Square and is a recent IBM Champion Award recipient as well. Now, Ryan's going to be diving through the challenges, or the changes, and helping explain what they mean to you and your environment. And we'll also have some time at the end for some Q&A. Now, you can, at any time during the webinar, you can submit any questions using the toolbar on the right side of your screen. So please go ahead and load those up, and then we'll answer as many as we can at the end. But before we do get started, I'd like to take a minute to share with you just a bit about PM Square. Here at PM Square, we're a full-service analytics consulting firm, helping our clients solve their business problems with data and analytics every day. And as you can imagine, those engagements can come in every shape and size, from rolling out analytics to new groups, to training, to helping companies modernize and upgrade their environments from Cognos 10 or from various releases of Cognos 11 up to the latest, like 11.1.2 that we're talking about today, to more architectural agreements or engagements for installation and configuration or performance tuning, support, and really everything in between. As a company, we also offer our own proprietary solutions, like our PM Square Thrive offering. If you're unfamiliar with that, it grants you unparalleled insight into the activity of your environment from a user adoption perspective, a performance perspective, as well as stability. So be sure to check that out when you get a chance. Please feel free to reach out to us if your organization or you are having any analytics challenges that really could benefit from an outside opinion. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Ryan to walk us through the content for today's webinar. And again, feel free to lob your questions into the toolbar, and then we'll get to them at the end.
Great, thanks, Chris. So what we're going to cover today is what is in the new Cognos 11.1.2 release. So this release is hot off the presses. It actually came out a week ago today, and we spent this week installing it, configuring it, kicking the tires on it, and trying to make sure that at PM Square we could wrap our head around, what are the major features of this release and what do they mean for Cognos customers. So really they come in a couple buckets. The first one is going to be your bug fixes and performance improvements, right? This kind of, for those of you who are maybe used to the way things used to be when we got, there were kind of two release streams, fix packs and feature packs, and the fix packs had bug fixes and the feature packs had the new features. We're not really doing that anymore with Cognos. We're bundling the new features and the bug fixes and performance improvements into the main release stream. So that's what you'll see here in this version. Second, there are some dashboard and story enhancements that we'll cover. Some data module enhancements that we'll cover. Now, you'll see as I'm going through these that while these are the changes to dashboards and data modules are good and impactful changes, the list of them is not huge, right? But what is huge is the fourth thing, and really the major feature of Cognos Analytics 11.1.2, which is the inclusion of Jupyter Notebook capabilities within Cognos. So I know for those of you who are tuning in who are long-time Cognos folks like me, Jupyter Notebooks is maybe not something you have a ton of exposure with. So before we jump into the demo, I do want to just set some ground rules or give you some understanding of what a Jupyter Notebook is, what you can do with it in Cognos, and then what that means, right? Because this is in a lot of ways a very exciting feature to add to Cognos, not just because it enables data science, which is what everybody thinks of when they think of Jupyter Notebooks, but also what it can do for you in terms of other features that it can bring to your business intelligence practice beyond just kind of pure statistical analysis. So what is a Jupyter Notebook? A Jupyter Notebook is really kind of a Python-based data science, data blending, and ETL framework, right? Now, I have ETL on there. I wouldn't use a Jupyter Notebook to replace Informatica or Data Stage, right? But for low to medium complexity ETL tasks, you can do a lot within a Jupyter Notebook. It contains live code, equations, visualizations, and notes, all within a single view, which you'll see in a few minutes here, kind of what that means, right? But you can think of it as almost like, you know, like an actual notebook that a scientist would make. Back in the day when, you know, scientists were standing around in white lab coats and holding clipboards, you know, you would have on that clipboard, you would have the equations you were doing, you would have your notes about the equations, you might doodle out a graph or something like that. That's really, a Jupyter Notebook is really kind of the modern version of that experience. A Jupyter Notebook provides access to thousands of open source libraries. So one of the big takeaways I want you guys to take from this is that, you know, we all have these ideas of, man, wouldn't it be great if Cognos could blank, right? Maybe there's a particular problem you're trying to solve and data modules and framework manager can't quite give you the data blending capabilities that you need to solve that problem. There's a pretty darn good chance that, that there's a Python library that's going to do that for you. And now you'll have access to that within Cognos. And finally, and this is, I think, really worth highlighting, is that as of right now, Python is the most popular data science skill in the world. So I think, you know, if we think back a couple of years ago, probably R was really hot, and that's what you heard people talking about. And as you see on this slide, this is a graph I took from somebody who, it was somebody's personal blog where they had done an analysis of job postings on a number of different sites to see what are the most requested skills on those job postings for data science jobs. R is still quite popular, but in the last year, 2 years, Python has passed it as the most popular data science tool in the world. So this is, you know, beyond its utility for helping you enhance your Cognos environment, it's also going to be a really useful skill for you to pick up as an individual. Now, how does it work in Cognos? The first thing to understand is that you have to install IBM's distribution of Jupyter Server on a separate machine from your Cognos application servers or content store, and that machine has to be a Linux machine, right? So right now there's no Windows option. If you want to utilize this functionality, you have to go with Linux for that Jupyter install. What it allows you to do is build notebooks directly within the Cognos user interface. So this is not a separate UI or a separate URL that you go to build something and then like you pull it into Cognos somehow via a deployment. It's nothing like that. You can build the Jupyter Notebook from the ground up directly within Cognos itself. Notebooks can be run on a schedule defined within Cognos. So you can build it in Cognos. When you're done, you can schedule within Cognos the same way you would schedule any other object in Cognos, like a report or a data set refresh. And then finally, these interact with Cognos in a number of ways. So the first way is that you can create a Jupyter Notebook that is going to pull data from a Cognos data source. Say I uploaded an Excel spreadsheet to Cognos, and now I want to do some more advanced data science or statistical analysis on it. I can access it directly from Cognos. I can do that with a data module, that sort of thing. Jupyter can then, within that framework, clean, transform, and manipulate the data that you pulled out of your Cognos data source, right? So you can do transformations to it. You can write that output, you can then write that output back to Cognos as a data set. So I just want to make sure that that point is clear, because I think once I started wrapping my head around this stuff, that's really when the full power of this new feature set became apparent to me, which was now within Cognos, I can pull data that, data models I already have, pull data out of that, do lots of data transformation to it, statistical analysis, make statistical changes, do predictive analysis, whatever I want. Then when I'm done, I can create kind of a result set and push that result set back into a data set, which Cognos can now use in reports, in dashboards, in stories. So really a very powerful piece of the Cognos workflow is being provided here. And then the final thing is that, you know, Jupyter is not just for data cleansing and building data sets, but you can also build visualizations directly within Jupyter itself, right? And that is where we're again going to see a lot of power as far as what this can do for you now that it's available and integrated within Cognos. So with that said, enough of the slides, right? I'm going to jump into the demo to show you exactly what it is that I'm talking about and what those new features are. So let me go ahead and pop open my Cognos environment here. So this is Cognos 11.1.2 that, again, came out last week that we installed. I'm going to go ahead and full screen it because that's prettier, right? So before I jump into the Jupyter stuff, I do want to touch on, you know, the enhancements to kind of the base Cognos functionality that is a part of this release. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at, for those of you who have experience uploading Excel files and that sort of thing, there are some slight changes to that. So if I were to grab an Excel file and drag it in here, you can see, and this is actually an 11.1.1 feature, but a lot of people aren't aware of it. So I did want to highlight it here. And there are probably a couple other 11.1.1 features that I will show because they're super cool, and I just want to make sure people are aware of them. But you see now when I upload an Excel spreadsheet, and I can actually choose, like, what do I want to do with it, right? Do I want to upload the Excel spreadsheet and immediately build a data module? Do I want to build a dashboard? Do I want to launch a Jupyter notebook, right? I have that option here. But the other thing I can do, and this is really great and so simple, but such an incredible enhancement, is you'll notice as I browse, say, the team content here, I now have, if I look at my new button, I'm going to have the ability to upload files, right? So here in my content, you see I click new, upload files. Now I could select an Excel file and upload it directly to whichever folder I'm currently looking at. In all the 11.0 releases and in 11.1.1, your only option when you upload an Excel file is for it to go directly to your My Content, and then you have to copy it to no location. Whereas now you're able to upload it anywhere, right, via this user interface. So a couple other changes to show you. If we were to think about, say, data modules and what are the changes to data modules, I'll go ahead and pop one open here for you guys to see. So I'm going to create a new data module. In this case, I'm going to pull in some data from our trusty Go Sales warehouse. I'll go ahead and choose that. I'm going to discover related tables. So this is kind of like an AI, a lightweight AI that's designed to help you find the tables that you want. In this case, if I were to type into here, say, sales target, and hit return, it's going to find that table and some tables that are related to that. If this looks like what I want, I can go ahead and say OK, and it's going to open the data module, and you'll notice all of the tables are already joined together, right? So the changes in data modules a lot of them are subtle. For example, now you have access, if I were to right-click on any of these tables, you'll see I have access to a much more full-featured menu of options for interacting with it from the relationships view. Whereas in 11.1.1 and earlier releases, I don't have access to the same features clicking on a table here that I might have clicking on the table here, right? They've simplified that and made it so that you get access to the same stuff no matter where you click on the table. A lot of the big changes in data modules are related to this relationship view and making it look better and make it more functional. So for example, there's now a focus mode where if I pick a particular table and I turn on focus mode, it will hide everything else and only show me the objects that are related to that table. Now in a simple model like this, that's not such a big deal, but imagine you had a model with 80 tables. That might make working with your model much, much easier, the ability to turn that on. Another great change is, you didn't have a lot of control over how this was viewed in 11.1.1 and earlier releases. So if I were to make all of this stuff, if I were to make this kind of crazy looking, right, I would have to manually change, like unpack all of this to get a view that I might want. Whereas now we have an auto arrange option, like what you would have in Framework Manager, where it will automatically arrange these on the screen so that you can see what it is that you're looking at a little better, right? Now, the other big change in here is going to be related to how you can set the kind of the properties of calculations, where you can change how they aggregate, right? So if I were to build a new calc in here, and let me just see what would be just create a calculation, a simple one. You see here, right, calculate after aggregation. So this was a feature that was missing from data modules, just the ability to tell it, hey, am I going to calc before aggregation or after aggregation, like you might in, say, Report Studio / report authoring. When you're authoring a calc, now you have the ability to set that within data modules. So again, I think a huge enhancement in 11.1.2 that is kind of I hesitate to call it a small thing, right? It's just a checkbox, but this solves a huge data modeling problem that you may run into that previous to this version you were not able to solve, right? So, a small change in the UI equals a lot more power in terms of modeling data within data modules. Now, for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with some of the features that are in the 11.1.1 release, I do want to just highlight one or two of the coolest features that are available in that, particularly as it relates to the handling of date type, like date fields. So I'm going to add a new source to my data module. We're going to just go ahead and browse in here. I'm going to grab, this is going to be an Excel file. I'm going to add in here just to show you kind of how this data, this new kind of date handling feature will work. So there we go. So I'm going to grab this, and you'll see in here that it's added in this new Excel file. Sometimes this takes a second to pop up for whatever reason. Let's see if something's going on here. Okay, did I accidentally click on cancel? Oh, it's having an issue loading the source. Okay, well, what would probably work easiest then is for me to just grab the time dimension out of this Go sales, and that will give us the same effect. So what's really cool in here, as far as, and this is in the 11.1.1 release, but I do want to highlight it because it's just so powerful, is the ability to do relative time very easily within data modules. And this is an area where data modules kind of move past your Framework Manager functionality in order to kind of give you something a little more advanced and provide those of you who are longtime FM users a reason to consider using this even for your enterprise IT modeling. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to choose to add new sources. And if I go into the samples, you'll see that I have these calendars, right? So this is something IBM provides. They provide 2 calendar examples. You can build your own custom calendar if say you have a fiscal year that runs through midsummer or something like that. You can build your own calendar to reflect your company's individual corporate calendar. In this case, I'll just choose the fiscal calendar. And you'll notice it added a new table in here, right? Now what I can do is if I were to take something like this date, and I were to go to lookup reference and choose fiscal calendar, you'll see it automatically builds a whole bucket of custom time filters, right? And it really is that easy to do that. And we've tested these out. These function very well. And for those of you who have done this type of thing in Framework Manager, you know that building each of these as a custom calc could take a significant amount of time, right? The other great thing that it does is if I were to take a look at, say, my sales target, I can do the same thing here, where I'm going to choose a lookup reference. And when I expand this, you'll see I now have a huge bucket of predefined relative time measures. So that's an 11.1.1 feature. For those of you who are on 11.1.1, you can use this now. But I did want to highlight it here because I really do think it's so cool. And I know a lot of my customers are not aware that this is an option at this point. But for those of you who have to do this type of analysis frequently, and certainly for those of you who, like me, harken back to ye olde Cognos Transformer days and pine for this type of functionality where I can just choose some date elements and say, hey, Cognos, you figure out the relative time. We finally have that available again within the Cognos feature set. So those are the data module changes. There are some changes to the dashboards that I'm going to want to highlight. So I'll go ahead and create a dashboard here. And we'll just take a look at what some of those changes are. I think these, again, are small, but very powerful. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at here, if I look at my American Time Use Survey data set, is I'm just going to grab education level and weekly earnings. And I'm going to add them into my dashboard. Of course, you know, Cognos creates this very nice bar chart for me. To have this make a little more sense, I am going to want to change the summarization type here for weekly earnings to change it to an average from a sum, right? Now, you'll notice if I take a look at the x-axis here that these are not sorted in the proper order, right? I mean, they're sorted alphabetically. But if we look at this, we're looking at education levels. And we know that education level has its own particular sort order that is the appropriate way to look at something like that. Well, now what I can do directly in the visualization by right-clicking on the axis and then choosing sort, you'll see there's a new option called custom. And this allows me to come in here and actually set the appropriate sort order for this item, right? So now I can come in and say, you know, put this in the order that we know that it is supposed to go in. I click apply. You'll see it rearranges everything so that 9th grade is on the left, doctoral degree is on the right. And now I have that sort order that I expect automatically in here. So in 11.1.1 or previous versions, of course, I could have put it in this order, but I would have basically had to write some kind of custom calc to tell it what order I want it to display in. Now I can just interact directly with the user interface and get that type of functionality. The second thing I want to highlight in here before we move into Jupyter Notebooks is the ability to create custom groups directly within the dashboard UI. So again, I'm going to create a chart in here, except this time I'm going to choose age ranges and weekly earnings, drag them in to take a look at, and we can see again in here that I have these different age ranges, each, you know, roughly 20-year age ranges, breaking up the people who filled out the survey. And what I can do at this point, first of all, there's a new selector tool that I think is worth highlighting, where I can go ahead and grab custom buckets of items on the visualization. So say I want to take these two bars, right? I use the selector tool to highlight them. Now I have just those bars selected. And if I right-click on it and then choose custom group, I can directly from the visualization itself give this group a name, like say I want to call this millennials, right? That roughly corresponds to people 20 through 40. Not exactly, but you know, roll with me here. I choose OK. You'll see it's going to automatically redraw the visualization to give me my millennials bucket. And then I could do the same thing for this group. Maybe we'll call this group Gen X. And we'll do the same thing for people 60 through 80. And of course, these are going to be our boomers, right? Again, not the exact right years, but for the sake of argument. Now, I've got an issue where I kind of have, again, a weird sort order. Now I can come in at this point, and if I want to apply that custom sort functionality, again, I can say, okay, well, the way this is supposed to go is 0 to 19, then millennials, then Gen X, then boomers, then 80 plus, right? So these are features that are very useful if you're an IT professional who's tuning in today, but particularly for your end users, these are the types of things that we hear loud and clear from end users that they really need in a self-service environment to make Cognos' dashboarding as useful as possible for them. And so while it's not an earth-shattering feature, I think it's really greatly enhances the usability of dashboards and to give you the ability to make your output look exactly the way that you need it to look. And that's really the spirit of not only the 11.1.2 changes to dashboards, but also the 11.1.1 changes to dashboards. We're all centered around, hey, this is an easy to use tool, but it's not quite customizable enough for what either IT or end users expect. And that's what they've added in here. Now, those are the 11.1.2 changes. For just a super brief overview of the 11.1.1 changes, in case you're unfamiliar. Again, it all centers around your ability to customize what you're seeing. So the ability to change these font sizes, for example. In the 11.0 releases, you can't change these font sizes. Now I can, right? Now I use, because I'm a huge nerd, right? I use a high resolution display for gaming. But when I'm using Cognos, it makes all the text really small. So I can go ahead and resize the text like this in order to make it something that's a little more readable, right? Again, not available in 11.1.0. Another example of better customization that you can see in this version that's not in the 11.0 releases would be custom color palettes. This was a huge ask forever. Our company has a very particular shade of green, and if the bars aren't that shade of green, people are going to be upset, right? In the 11.0 releases, you were out of luck. Now there's this actual custom palette builder where you can come in here and put in the exact shade of green that you require. Cognos will automatically suggest colors that it thinks contrast nicely. Of course, I can override any of these if I want. But more importantly, I could then name my palette, use my palette personally in all the dashboards, and also make that palette available to other people so that we can define a custom corporate palette for use in dashboards that are available to all our IT and self-service users. So that's the direction that dashboards have taken in the last two releases, and really where we expect it to continue to go in the future. Is as far as basic usability and ease of use, dashboards are in a really nice place. Now it's about giving you more fine-tuned control over what you're seeing and better options for things like prompts and filtering and that sort of thing. So, like I said, not a huge number of changes, but I think very nice quality of life changes to the kind of out-of-the-box Cognos functionality. The big change here, again, is going to be that Jupyter notebook. So when I click this new button, you'll see I now have a new option in the new menu that says Notebook. If I click on Notebook, it's going to launch the Jupyter notebook capability with a blank notebook, right? So the thing to understand about these, especially for us longtime Cognos people, like one of the reasons we loved Cognos is because I didn't have to code, right? I could use the user interface. Well, Jupyter is code, it's Python. And so in order to interact with this, you need to actually learn some Python in order to do this. Now, I will tell you, Python is considered a very straightforward language to learn. There's a ton of resources available online to help with that. And there's a gigantic open source community building data transformation and data science tools or libraries for Python. So once you do get up to speed with it, you're going to be blown away with what it is that you're able to do. Now, for the sake of today's webinar, I'm not going to sit down here and write some live Python code. We're going to walk through some examples and show you how this type of thing works. Now, these Jupyter notebooks work, they're objects in Cognos. So you'll see I can navigate to the Cognos samples, to notebooks. These are notebook objects. They act exactly like any other object in Cognos, right? I can save them, I can copy them, I can do all that type of stuff. I can come in here and look at the properties, and I can schedule them. And that's a really important thing to understand, because once you start to wrap your head around what you can do with Jupyter, you realize that you can use Jupyter for kind of like step-by-step data cleansing or lightweight ETL processes, which of course all of us know once you build an ETL, the next thing you need to do is schedule it, right? And you can do it from here. You can schedule it exactly like you would a report, time-based, or you can schedule your Jupyter notebook by a trigger, so that maybe you're pulling data out of your data warehouse and doing some data science on it. You can say, hey, when the ETL, the nightly ETL finishes, whenever that time is, submit a trigger to Cognos, and when Cognos receives that trigger, it will run my Jupyter notebook and spit out that data science process that I've designed into it, right? Now, let's take a look at how these actually work and function. So I'm going to open an example here. If you recall when I was talking about how the Jupyter notebook has the code, it has the explanation of the code, it has the visualizations, all built into a single view. That's what you're seeing here. So the way to think about this is I have some controls up at the top. I can page up and down. I can move things up and down in the notebook, right? But what I'm really looking at is here is kind of some text that's describing to me what this code is going to do. And beneath it is the code itself. And the way this works is I run through it. So when I click the run button, it's actually going to execute this snippet of code, right? So that imports some libraries, right? That's what we did here. The first step, we're going to import the libraries we want to use for our analysis. Then here's a piece of code. Okay, the cell below turns off the auto scrolling for output cells in the notebook, right? It's the type of thing that you can do in here. You have total control over what's going on. But I'm going to page through and basically run these. And you can see when I ran that, it generated some output for me to look at. So the way you kind of build these is you put in your description of what the code's going to do. Then you put in the code snippet itself. And if there's any necessary output, meaning, if it fails, I want it to deliver a failure message, or I want it to show some information to me, all of that is going to automatically appear. Well, not automatically, you have to tell it to appear, right? But once you tell it what output you want, it will appear in line with the code. So instead of having just a wall of Python in here, that you would have to come in here and it may be difficult to decode, we can break our Python up into discrete chunks. We can provide a description to what each discrete chunk does, along with the output of that discrete chunk as it's executing, right? Now let me go ahead and, I realize that there's some saved output in here, so let me go ahead and clear that saved output out so that we can see kind of how this works, right? So I'm going to go through and start running these. So the first few, I'm bringing in the libraries that I want. Now here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to read in data from a CSV, right, that is available on IBM's website. So it's not something that's in Cognos. It's something that's on IBM's website that I'm now reading into the Jupyter notebook. It provided some output for me to take a look at a sample of some of the data in that CSV. Now in this step, I'm actually going to write that data into a Cognos data set. So for those of you who maybe have data on the cloud and you want to try to get it into Cognos, if there is a Python library that allows you to pull that data from the cloud, you can go through exactly these steps here to pull that data into a Jupyter notebook and then write it right here. This line writes that data into a Cognos data set, and now I could build a report off of it or a dashboard, right? It really is that simple and that powerful. And that's how I want you thinking about this. not just as a data science tool, right? I have not done any data science so far. All I've done is pull in data from a cloud-based source or publicly available based source on the web and saved it into Cognos. And if that's all I needed, this may be by far the easiest way for me to do that. And if it is, I would encourage you to consider learning Python and learning how to do it in this manner, right? Now, I will just, for the sake of time, I don't want to, I won't talk through what every step of this notebook does, but you'll see as I step through, it's continuing. At this point, it's starting to do some real data cleansing and data science type activities. It's showing me each step, giving me the output for that step so that I can understand, did it pass, did it fail, what does the data look like, is it doing what I expected as I continue to run through the notebook. You notice it will also tell you, it puts a number in here. That's one way that you can tell that that section of code executed, is when the number is complete. And that number also helps you ensure that the code is executed in the order that you expect, right? Now I'm going to import some additional libraries and tell it to generate a visualization, right? Now this is a visualization. If you look at it, it's got the full range, the 20th to 80th percentile, the target range, and the average. So we know that this is not the type of thing that a Cognos visualization, that Cognos can deliver out of the box in a visualization, right? But now that I've built this in a Jupyter notebook, if I go back to my dashboard, and let me create a new tab here, just to show you how this works. There's actually a new insertable object called Notebook. And I can go through, I insert that object, I go through, I point to the notebook that I'm interested in. And what it's going to allow me to do, here's that time series analysis I just ran. You can see it's got all the different sections of the notebook. So maybe what I wanted to insert was this table, right? But in this case, what I want to insert is going to be this visualization. I choose OK. Now you can see there it is, right? So for those of you who say, there are visualizations, maybe more advanced visualizations that I need that Cognos doesn't provide out of the box, or the out-of-the-box visualizations are good, except, I need to customize it in a really particular way that I can't currently do in dashboards. This is a solution for you, right? So if I wanted to, let's imagine that I'm pulling this data, this notebook is pulling data off of something that, does a nightly load or something like that. I can schedule the notebook to run. It's going to run every morning. This visualization is going to update, and then that new visualization is going to be available to my dashboard as soon as that notebook is finished processing. Exactly like it would if it were any other object in Cognos. And that is really, I think, the power of this Jupyter integration into Cognos is really, it's not just that Jupyter is a great solution for doing statistical analysis of data science, right? Like that's true. But what is really powerful about integrating it into Cognos in this manner, and I think gives IBM, a real advantage over some of their competitors in the business intelligence space, is that now it's very easy to take something that was built in a Jupyter notebook and put it in a Cognos dashboard and make it available in your regular, BI workflow to hundreds or thousands of users in a secured, controllable manner, in a way that you might not have if you're just using Jupyter on its own, right? A lot of times there's a disconnect between data science and BI in companies where BI has the power to build a report that can be sent out to hundreds of thousands of people and really impact the business that way. Data science can do more of the advanced type of stuff that you see here, but they're not always talking to one another. And even if they are, it can be very difficult technically to take what the data scientists build in something like Jupyter and deploy it in the traditional ways that Cognos is very good at when it comes to, hey, we discovered an insight. Now we need to, we want to make sales projections easily available to our sales team in a dashboard. As you saw here, doing that it's just a matter of seconds in Cognos, rather than trying to find some way to load that data into to do all your Jupyter stuff and then load that data into a database and then have Cognos access the database, or alternatively try to build a full custom front end for your data science for the sales guys to access. Now you can just do it in a matter of seconds in here, like you saw. Now I could walk through, there's other cool examples of notebooks in here. I'm not going to walk through them all. I do encourage you. I know IBM has some good examples available for you to look at once you upgrade to 11.1.2. There are also YouTube videos that IBM has provided that will show you some of these things in action. But really, that is the core enhancement of the 11.1.2 release. You'll hear me say this a lot, I think, in the next couple of months for those of you who are PM Square customers or interact with us more regularly, right? That we really, not to think of this in terms of a strictly a data science tool, but to really think about this in terms of how it can help you do things in Cognos that you can't do today, right? That aren't even necessarily data science. So here's what I mean by that: getting creative with Jupyter. Like, what can you do in there? We've talked through a little bit of this, but to reiterate it, types of data prep, cleaning, data blending that go beyond what's available in Framework Manager or data modules. Even if your end goal is just to build a report, you can do in Python using Jupyter Notebooks. Predictive analysis on existing Cognos data, right? I've got Cognos data. I want to pull that in to do some predictive analysis on it. The ability to easily integrate custom visualizations into Cognos, as we saw, and then end-to-end analytics development. So just an idea of what you could do. There's a Python library called Simple Salesforce that allows you to interact with Salesforce and pull Salesforce data into Python, right? Now, getting that into Cognos, of course you can do, but it requires a little bit of effort. What you could do is create a Jupyter notebook, pull that information into Cognos using the Simple Salesforce library, clean and prep the data, push it to a Cognos data set, do some statistical analysis and data science, build some advanced visualizations within Python, and then in Cognos dashboards, combine your Python viz and your Cognos visualizations into one place to easily distribute your Salesforce data, and then schedule the whole thing. So once you've got that done, it's running on a schedule. You don't have to worry about it anymore going forward. So that is really, I think, again, beyond simple data science is the power of what you can do in Jupyter Notebooks in Cognos. Now, a few notes on the Cognos Analytics release cycle and what that looks like. If you are still on a 10.2 release, the extended support is going to run through April 2021. As of April 2021, Cognos 10 is officially and completely unsupported by IBM. So for those of you who are still on 10, I know there are still some of you out there, so don't feel bad if that's you. It's something we do need to start thinking about because we will be, we'll be to the point where if you call IBM and you have a question about 10, they're straight up not going to be able to help you as of April 2021. For those of you who are on the 11.0 release, the long-term support release is 11.0.13, right? So if you can get to 11.0.13, IBM will support this version. It will provide support updates, which means bug fixes, but this version is not going to get new features, right? So it's for those of you who have a harder time or are less comfortable with IBM's more rapid release cycle that we're on now. If you would like to stay on an 11.0 release for a significant amount of time, I would encourage you to upgrade to this one so that you are on the long-term supported version. And then, for 11.1, we're in what they're calling the innovation stream. What that means is we're going to be getting new features and bug fixes for the foreseeable future, right? So here's something that IBM has provided to kind of in a more graphical view to show you what that looks like. but it's really the same information that I just talked through. So it's important to understand the way this is going now is we're going to have a lot of rapid releases, but there will always be what's called a long-term support release for you to stay on if the rapid release schedule is something that you're uncomfortable with. And then, when the next long-term support release comes out, you can maybe move directly from one long-term support release to the other if that's something that you were interested in. Finally, a glimpse into the future, what's coming next. A lot of what you see on here has been delivered, right? I think the things to mention that we would highlight for the second half, visualization enhancements. There's going to be a big focus on making the 11.1 visualizations better, both in dashboards and reporting, giving you more control over them, enhancing how they look, giving you a better cross-tab in dashboards, that sort of thing. Improved integration between Cognos Analytics and Planning Analytics. I know this is a big one for some of our customers. And then extensible ontologies. I won't get too deep into this, but just to let you know what it is. For those of you who have tried out 11.1 or are familiar with what it offers, there's now like an AI chatbot that you can talk to, right? So what extensible ontologies will do is it will allow you to provide kind of a custom language to that chatbot so that the chatbot understands, when we say a particular term in our company, we mean a very specific thing, right? We don't mean, when we say sales target, we mean something really particular that maybe not everybody else means when they say sales target. So you can provide that to Cognos and it will understand that. Or a great example would be like region, Like, well, in our sales department, region means like the region of the sales guys, right? But for our marketing department, region means like the region where we're running our marketing campaigns, and those things are not the same. You'll be able to tell Cognos when someone from sales says region, it means this. When someone from marketing says region, it means this other thing. So that will be, I think, a very significant enhancement to Cognos that we have to look forward to.
Okay, thank you so much, Ryan. So again, please feel free to log any questions using the toolbar on your right. While you guys are doing so, I'll share a couple other ways to stay engaged with PM Square. You can head to our website and click on either the blog or connect there, and you'll be able to find all of the events that we have upcoming, the most recent articles that have been written, any public training courses that are going to be scheduled. And then I'll go ahead and call out a couple specific ones. So our very next webinar is going to be Introduction to Dashboards in Cognos Analytics. That's going to be in a couple of weeks' time, Thursday, May 16th at noon. And then we also have a public training course coming up as well in 3 weeks' time that's actually training on what we just learned about today with the Jupyter Notebooks and the other new features in 11.1.2. And then lastly, I'll call out our large event of the year, our Business Analytics Conference, or in short, BACON. That's going to be in August here in the Chicagoland area. It's a 2-day event. I highly recommend it. That event's going to have 3 different tracks to it. You're going to be able to get all the latest and greatest on Cognos Analytics, as well as the emerging technologies with Watson, decision optimization, predictive analytics. Really anything that's relevant to the ever-changing world of analytics will be covered in some form or fashion at this event. So highly recommend that. You can find more about that at pmsquare.com/bacon. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and transition into the Q&A. We do have a ton of questions queued up, and I can tell already that we won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can and still end on time here. So let's start with this one. So Ryan, is there any option to customize the default landing page in 11.1.2?
Yeah. So there's Cognos actually now has a pretty nice themes and extensions capabilities that allow you to do things like customize the landing page itself, customize the sidebar, the top bar, put in custom folders. We even have kind of in the PM Square Labs some full-blown custom applications that will do things in report authoring, for example, by customizing what's on that top bar. So yes, you can customize both the landing page and the overall look of Cognos using those features.
Excellent. Now, does uploading Excel files clutter up the content store?
Oh, that's a good one. Sort of. What it does really, so it does. I mean, when you upload an Excel file, here's what it does. It takes the Excel file. It doesn't just stick an Excel file in your content store. It actually reads in the data from the Excel file and it puts it in an Apache Parquet file, and that's what gets stored in the content store. So the nice thing about Parquet is it is very heavily compressed, so that you know, if you were to upload a very large Excel file, the resulting Parquet file is going to be much smaller than that Excel file was. Now, with that said, yes, these objects are being put into your content store, and so you know, they will, or if there's a ton of them put in there, eventually they could come to start cluttering it up. The nice thing is that that you actually have an option to go ahead and, instead of having them put in the content store, to choose to have them stored on a disk somewhere instead. So I will be honest, I haven't really seen this being an issue yet, but if it were to become one, there is a solution in place for you to get those out of the content store and onto a disk.
Okay, great. So for custom sorting in dashboards, can you sort by a data item? For example, sorting months by a fiscal number?
Yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. So there's actually a, I mean, I can just show it, right? Where did you go, Cognos? So there's actually a sort by option. If I look at the properties of anything, right, you'll see sort by. So I can choose how I want to sort it. If I want to sort it by itself, like in this case, I'm looking at age range. Well, maybe I want to sort age range by something else, right? You know, I don't know, year. I mean, it doesn't make any, this example doesn't make any sense, but just to show you, right? So if I were to have like a month name and a month number, and of course I want to sort the month's name by the month number, this is exactly how you would do that.
Okay, great. Another question here says, are Jupyter visualizations reactive to other Cognos objects like filters?
That's a great question. So not right now, right? It's just kind of a link to the Jupyter visualization. Now, you know, default forward-looking statement, right? I have heard like whispers on the wind that is something that may happen at some point, but it's certainly, and I hope it happens, but you know, at this point I can neither guarantee that will happen or provide any kind of timeline for it. But there has been a rumor that will eventually be a possibility.
Very good. Now, do you need a specific license to use the Jupyter Notebook feature?
That's a good question. I think that it is available at Analytics Explorer and above.
Very good. Now, another question here for you. Is Jupyter Notebook's capability optional? Can it be secured to not display for certain users?
Absolutely, yeah. Yep, it's just as secureable as anything else in Cognos. So for your basic consumers, or maybe even your self-service users, you can just hide it so that it doesn't appear in the new menu or anything like that.
Okay, great. A couple more questions here. Are there any changes in system requirements as it relates to a migration path from an 11.0 upgrade to 11.1.2?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I would say is, you know, we haven't really settled on like a very easy rule of thumb where I could just say, oh yeah, just add however much memory or however much processor or something like that to your environment. Unfortunately, it really does kind of depend on your usage patterns and what your current hardware looks like. So what I would say as a general guideline is when you go to 11.1, either of the current 11.1 releases, what we find is that people have significantly more success rolling out the self-service features because they are so much improved over the 11.0 releases. So when I say that, in particular, I mean dashboards, but also data modules and that sort of thing. And so there's going to be, when that happens, there's a natural increase in the amount of capacity that you're going to require because you're just going to have more users doing more interactive workflows in the system, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is the data set processing between 11.0 and 11.1 moves to a new process. So it's not running on the old query service like it is in 11.0. It's now running on something called the compute service. So that will increase the amount of horsepower that you may require. Those things in conjunction lead me to recommend that you take a look at where you are in comparison to the Cognos recommended specifications, which are for like the minimum requirements for Cognos as of the 11.1 release per application server are going to be 8 cores and at least 16 gigabytes of memory, right? So if you are below that currently on an 11.0 or a 10 release, and your performance is good, you may not need to immediately bump it up when you go to 11.1, but I would say that our experience has been that once your end users start using this stuff and they start to like dashboards with all the enhancements there, that you are going to pretty quickly want to at least get yourself up to the minimum requirements, and probably above that, particularly when it comes to memory. So I know it's kind of a long answer, and you were probably hoping for that I could just say, oh yeah, just do this, right? But you know, everybody's environment is different and everybody's usage patterns is different. And because Cognos can do so much, you can use it for so many things, it's now so flexible. It's hard to just give you a canned answer. But to boil it all down, I would say start at the minimum. What my general recommendation would be, do the minimum required number of cores, 8, which is 8 cores per application server. Take the 16 gigabytes that they recommend for RAM, double it up to 32, and I would probably start there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. And with that, we are all out of time for questions. We've got dozens more that are unanswered. So for anyone with a question that didn't get an answer to, know that we will be sending out answers to all of these questions to everyone who attended the webinar. So please give us a little patience there, and then you should have your question answered in short order there. We do hope that you'll join us for future webinars and then consider some of our public training courses. And as I mentioned at the outset, should you have anything else that you'd like to discuss, challenges within your organization or to your analytics strategy going forward, we'd be more than happy to help in whichever way we can. So thank you again for joining today, and we'll look to see you at a future event. Thank you.